Hey guys, thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions or need any clarification throughout my presentation, please feel free to stop me. Today we're going to be diving into if exogenous carbohydrate improves performance by sparing liver and muscle glycogen, but not muscle glycogen, in exercise lasting longer than 2 hours. So to help us answer this question, I turned to Andy King and colleagues at Leeds Beckett University over in the UK. And they published a study back in 2018 that investigated carbohydrate doses' influence on liver and muscle glycogen and oxidation and performance throughout prolonged exercise. So their primary aim basically was to identify the optimal carbohydrate dose that maximizes performance. So here I made a visual diagram of the study design. The study had 10 trained male cyclists come in bi-weekly and do a 2-hour ride on a stationary bike at 77% of their VO2 max, followed by a 30-minute time trial where their power wattage was measured. They came in 5 times because there was 5 different drinks that they had to ingest throughout each trial that was randomly assigned to them. So the first one was a low glucose dose, which was 70 grams of glucose per hour, and then a 75 gram of glucose per hour for the high glucose group, and then a low glucose fructose dose, which was 90 gram per hour of glucose and fructose, 112.5 grams of glucose fructose for the high glucose fructose group, and then placebo. So you may be wondering, why didn't they just linearly increase the dosage of glucose and instead had glucose and fructose? And that's because a major rate-limiting step of exogenous carbohydrate oxidation is the saturation of carbohydrate transporters for the carbohydrate molecules across the intestinal membrane for absorption. So to bypass this saturation, using multiple transportable carbohydrate molecules allows for, so in this case glucose and fructose, they use different transporters so they can bypass the upper oxidation limit or upper oxidation rate. So for glucose, you can see the upper oxidation rate of SGLT1, which is the transporter, is 1 gram per minute. And then fructose, which uses a different one, a GLUT5 transporter, together the upper limit of saturation is raised to 1.6 to 1.8 grams per minute. So unsurprisingly then, the results, the glucose-fructose group had experienced the least amount of reduction of glycogen compared to the other doses and achieved the highest rate of exogenous carbohydrate oxidation. So the boxes that I outlined in red, you can see here, this is muscle glycogen oxidation and this is liver glycogen oxidation. So it had the least amount of usage of that. Interestingly though, you'd think that as the carbohydrate dosage increases, so would the reduction of use of liver muscle glycogen. However, there's no linear dose response, and actually the higher glucose fructose group had the highest rate of liver and muscle glycogen oxidation. And how does this affect performance? So this is a chart table I made based on data from the study, and you can see the percent improvement across from each carbohydrate dose. And again, unsurprisingly, the low glucose fructose group had the highest amount, or had the most amount of percent improvement compared to the different carbohydrate dosages. So to wrap it all up, how does this answer our question? It would seem that exogenous carbohydrates do improve performance. However, the study suggests that it spares both liver and muscle glycogen, and again, there's not a linear response. So there's an upper limit where performance begins to deteriorate. We're going to look at the validity of this article. So again, this is a randomized controlled trial, which on the hierarchy of scientific evidence is strong, but there were a bunch of limitations. So there's only male participants, so it fails to account for possible sex differences. There was a really small sample size, there's only 10 cyclists, so it limits the ability to establish significant differences and to see if improvements were actually made. And it also failed to explain the reasoning behind the overdosing, so why there was increased reliance on muscle and liver glycogen in the higher carbohydrate groups. So future studies could explore the mechanisms behind this. So to answer our question, we must exercise caution. This study doesn't really answer our question. In fact, in the article, a direct quote says that to be cautious because large individual variation in the study makes this data difficult to interpret. Thank you very much, guys. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Seema.
Why was there an increased reliance on glycogen at the highest carb dose?
Again, so as I said, the article didn't really go into the mechanisms on why this is, but I think a large reason to do it is because of the saturation of the transporters. The upper limit for glucose was 60 grams per hour, so in the higher glucose group, which was 75 grams, there was too much glucose, so I think, and then again you see that with the low glucose fructose group and the high glucose fructose group, which the high glucose fructose group had more exogenous CHO, like just kind of hanging around, and I think that is probably one of the reasons why there was increased use, but I don't know the exact mechanisms behind it.